is the Canon EOS R1 getting a faster autofocus system with improved subject movement prediction? And will this technology show up in other Canon cameras with phase detect autofocus, like the upcoming Canon EOS R5 Mark II? Well, stick around after this short break for all the details. But first, subscribe to this channel for a chance to win a Canon EOS R5. I'll be giving one away to one lucky subscriber once this channel reaches 100,000 subscribers. Anyone above the age of 18 with a valid mailing address is eligible. Additional terms and conditions are linked in the description down below. According to Canon patent filing JP 2023-149-423 Alpha, published on October the 13th, 2023, and filed March the 31st, 2022, Canon has found a way to enhance the phase detect autofocus system to be more accurate with their phase detect autofocus system by better predicting subject movement. And that's the first observation of this patent application that I want to draw your attention to. There's no mention in any way whatsoever that this camera or any other cameras are going to have a quad-pixel autofocus system, which is rather surprising to a degree because, well, we have the OM1, which was released with a quad-pixel autofocus system, and of course we've got this. Canon patent filing JP 2022-2383. And even Canon rumors upon reading this stated that I think we'd see such technology appear in the Canon EOS R1 first. But let's get back to the current patent. JP 149-423 says it solves the problem of autofocus accuracy to provide a control device capable of performing highly accurate autofocus control when performing frame additions. Control device. So what does that mean? Well, Canon patent applications never call out the individual camera or seldom call out the class of camera. So this could certainly apply to the Canon EOS R1 or the Canon EOS R5 Mark II or even entry-level Canon cameras. But what control device essentially means is it's referring to a type of camera that has an LCD. They found a way to focus at high speed with high accuracy when shooting live view. This answers the second question that I posed at the beginning of this video dealing with JP patent application 2023-149-423, and that is, will it be applied to all Canon cameras or just be reserved for expensive cameras like the Canon EOS R1? Well, all Canon cameras with a phase detect autofocus system and live view according to the patent application. Canon doesn't provide a different autofocus system to their high-end cameras than it does for the entry level. Yes, I know. Things like eye-controlled autofocus on the Canon EOS R3, but other than that, Canon doesn't remove capabilities from one camera to another, not in their stills hybrid line. And yes, I know, the R5C has a different type of autofocus system than the regular stills hybrid cameras from the R100 all the way up to, well, the upcoming Canon EOS R1, but it is a cinema camera. Everything about that camera is using a cinema OS, so that's why the autofocus system is different there. So how does this work? Well, the camera receives light from different regions by two photodiodes through one microlens. The autofocus system then performs pixel addition and correlation calculations on the autofocus signal to calculate image shift amount, image steepness, contrast, saturation defect, and other attributes. I know with some of that patent application terminology, things can seem a little bit confusing. Trust me, I know it's taken me already 2 hours to get to this point. But essentially what the patent application is talking about is communication in camera between the sensor, the image processor, and the lens controlling unit. But it's using terms such as focus unit, processing unit, control unit, signal unit, lens controlling unit. But basically it's talking about communication between those three major processing units: sensor, image processor, and of course the lens. And all this information is used to calculate the image shift. What has changed from one frame to another? If the delta is significant, the camera sets the correlation to high. The bandpass filter is changed according to the contrast information. The patent also describes how the control unit executes various camera functions such as power on and off, settings changes, still image, moving image, record start, autofocus control start, and recording video information in response to the input that the camera receives while operation. All that information coming from the image sensor. And while the camera control unit is calculating what needs to be done, it is exchanging information with the lens control unit in the lens apparatus, transmitting control commands to the lens. Still with me? Okay, we're going to take one more dive into the patent application to look at the terminology because I think it's very important to understand what the patent is communicating. So without further ado, here we go one last time. The camera control unit is mentioned a lot, but it does include the acquisition and the prediction unit. And while these units are talked about independently, they really are all part of the same unit. I've been talking about patent applications for several years, but it's only in the last, well, couple of months that I've started focusing on it a little bit more. As I'm looking for information on the Canon EOS R3 and the Canon EOS R1 and the Canon EOS R5 Mark II, one thing I've noticed is so far all the leaked specifications, supposed leaked specifications on the Canon EOS R5 and the R1 are, well, I don't consider them to be all that trustworthy, and neither does Canon Rumors. Most of them are rated as a CR0 or CR1, and same coming from the Camera Insider. So I thought, well, what better way to find out what's going to be in the Canon EOS R1 and the R5 by scanning through their patent applications as they become published. And so that's why I've been delving into this. And when I saw this patent application this morning while I was having my tea, I got a little bit excited, because anytime we see improvements to the autofocus system, that's a very positive thing. And anytime we see a patent application like this, it isn't too hard to apply it to a new camera, such as the Canon EOS R1 and the R5 Mark II. And that doesn't mean that this isn't going to come all the way down to other cameras at the entry level. Now, maybe it's not going to happen in a firmware update, but as the R50 gets refreshed, we will see an improvement to the autofocus system. The base autofocus system doesn't change from the R1 all the way down to the R100. But the timetable for releasing some of these capabilities, it's like cars. All those expensive top-level cars will get all these incredible features, but over 10 to 20 years, those high-end features will translate all the way down to, well, entry-level cars. And if you look at cars priced around $15,000 to $20,000 today, you'll see that they have capabilities that used to be only in $50,000 cars or even more 10 or 20 years ago. It's the same with cameras. But there are certain capabilities that might be limited to high-end cameras such as the Canon EOS R1 or the R5 Mark II. And that's capabilities such as eye-controlled autofocus that came out in the Canon EOS R3, and we haven't seen that in any other cameras that have come out afterwards, such as the, well, R5 Mark II, the R8, the R50, and certainly not in the R100. I am getting excited about what we're going to see in the Canon EOS R1 and the R5 Mark II, but as far as reading the patent applications, it can be a little challenging. And what was surprising in this patent application is that there's absolutely no mention of a quad pixel autofocus, dual pixel autofocus, even though this patent filing was filed 2 years prior to the 2383. So here we are 2 years later, 2 years after the filing date, but 2 years after the publishing date of 2383, and there's no mention of a quad pixel autofocus system. Now that doesn't mean that we won't have a quad pixel autofocus. Canon has a patent application for that. They don't have to talk about it in other cameras, but it's very interesting that this patent application does call out phase detect autofocus. Of course, quad pixel autofocus is still a phase detect autofocus system, isn't it? Interesting. I do expect the autofocus system in the Canon EOS R1 to be better than all other cameras, but where I think we're going to see the greatest improvements is the improvements to the artificial intelligence capabilities of this camera. Deep learning, for example, to be able to think like a human, to be able, like eye-controlled autofocus is a perfect example. If I'm filming my son while he's doing karate, and let's say he's practicing his coda, there's so many faces there, and while the R5 does a good job of locking onto my son, if somebody goes in front of him or if there's another face in the foreground that's closer, it will jump. But if I'm looking at my son through the viewfinder and I'm locked onto him, that is really impressive. And I would like to see capabilities like that come to more affordable cameras like the R6 Mark II. But deep learning, all those other capabilities, I think we're going to see significant improvements in the Canon EOS R1. And it doesn't matter if whether you're holding it landscape or portrait mode, I think we're going to see vast improvements. And if you want to stay up to date on all the latest camera gear news and rumors, whether it's the Canon EOS R5 Mark II, the Canon EOS R1, or even Sony, Nikon, and Panasonic cameras, then go ahead and subscribe, but make sure you also choose all notifications. Not only does it keep you up to date on the latest camera gear news and rumors, but it also helps this channel get recognized, because when you interact, when you like, when you subscribe, it really does help the YouTube algorithm to get this channel noticed. And for all those minor news and rumors, all that information that isn't quite big enough to have its own separate video, and sometimes that does include patent applications, it could be pricing information. This past week, we've had $500 off the Canon EOS R5, the Canon EOS R5C at $1,000 off the R3. We're seeing lots of, well, savings on lenses for all camera platforms. So go ahead and follow me on X, formerly known as Twitter, with this address here. And if you are looking at purchasing any of those items, then please consider using my affiliate links to Amazon.com, Adorama, and B&H. It doesn't cost you anything. You still get the sales, but I get a small percent back. I don't know, it's anywhere from 2 to 6%. Sometimes if I'm lucky, it's 12%. And that really does help fund this channel. It helps me purchase such a small channel like this with 44,000 subscribers to be able to purchase cameras like the Canon EOS R5, the R5 Mark II, the R1, an expensive glass like this 100 to 500 millimeter. So when you've got questions about gear, I'm not just some sort of rumor channel. I'm a rumor channel that actually buys, purchases, and uses the gear and uses them day in and day out. But that's it for now. Have yourself a great weekend, and we'll see you again soon.